King Charles has honoured his brother Prince Edward in a most royal manner on his birthday. Fittingly, the King's younger brother was in Scotland on the day a new title was bestowed upon him, one that comes with the responsibility of continuing their late father Prince Philip's work with young people around the globe.
A single envelope arrives at Bagshot Park on the morning of March 25th, 2026. No press pack, no photographer waiting outside, just a courier, a signature, and a piece of paper that reportedly took Buckingham Palace's legal office the better part of a year to finally agree to send. Inside it, according to sources close to the household, confirmation. Everything Prince Edward held, the title, the house, the jewels his wife wore for a quarter century, was his, not conditionally, not pending review. His permanently, and the institution that had allegedly spent years trying to claw pieces of it back had just put its surrender in writing. Sit with that for a second. The man the tabloids never bothered profiling. The brother who was always described as steady because nobody could think of anything more interesting to say about him. That man had apparently just outlawyered the crown itself. How does someone the palace never treated as a threat build a position so airtight that King Charles III's own legal team reportedly couldn't find a way through it? The answer, according to those familiar with the matter, doesn't start with lawyers at all. It starts with a dying man's signature, a mother trying to protect her youngest son from an institution she knew too well, and a tiara that was never supposed to become a legal battleground. Let's start with the tiara, because that's reportedly where the whole thing nearly blew apart in public. Early in 2026, before any of this reached formal legal channels, a palace official is said to have arrived at the Edinburgh residence for what was described, officially, as a routine heritage review, a jewellery audit. Standard procedure, that was the language used. What it allegedly amounted to was someone showing up with a checklist to question a piece Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, had worn as unmistakably her own for 25 years, the Anthem Tiara. This wasn't pulled from some shared royal vault. It was commissioned specifically for Sophie's 1999 wedding, built from 4 antique elements in a honeysuckle pattern drawn from Queen Victoria's private collection and gifted to her personally by Queen Elizabeth II. For most of 2 decades, it was the only tiara Sophie wore. Within the family, it was understood, quietly, never announced, that this piece was hers alone, in a way few others were. Now, reportedly, someone wanted to reclassify it, the argument being floated, because the tiara contained historical crown-era stones, it could technically be treated as crown property, meaning it would sit in the central vault, and Sophie would need to request permission to wear her own wedding gift. Here's where you need to actually think this through with me. If that logic holds, if a personal wedding present from a reigning monarch can retroactively become institutional property because of what it's made of, then every piece Elizabeth ever gave to anyone is suddenly up for review, including, notably, jewellery that had come into Camilla's collection through royal channels. The argument, if pushed to its conclusion, threatened to swallow itself. Edward's legal team is said to have spotted that immediately, but apparently they didn't stop at pointing out the contradiction. They reportedly produced a 1999 deed of gift signed by Elizabeth herself, explicitly naming the Anthem Tiara a private wedding present, not a loan, not held in trust, not shared, and there was more. Edward had at the same time commissioned a matching pearl necklace and earrings to be worn alongside it, funded through crown channels, but designed under his own personal design rights. His lawyers are said to have argued the tiara and the pearl set formed a single artistic unit, meaning you couldn't legally remove one without unraveling the other. Then there was the moment nobody could argue with because it happened in front of witnesses. At a 2019 reception at Buckingham Palace for the Queen Elizabeth Diamond Jubilee Trust, mid-speech, Sophie turned toward Elizabeth and without meaning to, said one word out loud, "Mama." It slipped out in a room where nothing slips out by accident, and it reportedly told you everything about what that gift actually meant. According to people close to the situation, Edward's team went one step further still, warning that if the tiara claim wasn't dropped, they would release private letters, believed to have been written by Elizabeth, expressing her wishes for Sophie's jewellery to remain untouched. And allegedly, those letters didn't stop there. Sources suggest they also touched on Elizabeth's private feelings about Camilla, feelings Charles had spent years quietly working to leave in the past as he rebuilt her public standing. If true, releasing them wouldn't just cost a tiara fight, it could undo a decade of careful image repair in a single afternoon. But the tiara, as dramatic as it was reportedly never the real prize. That was Bagshot Park. Ask yourself this: if someone handed you a 120-room, half-collapsed Tudor Gothic mansion and told you the rent was £5,000 a year, but you'd have to personally fund every repair to bring it back to royal standard, would you sign? In March 1998, that offer landed in front of Prince Edward, and he said yes. Bagshot Park sits on 51 acres inside Windsor Great Park. It had been left to rot after serving as an army chaplain's residence, so neglected that the Crown Estate had reportedly floated, turning it into a hotel or conference venue rather than keep funding it. That's how little institutional value it carried before Edward took it on. He spent £1.36 million of his own pre-royal duty earnings restoring it. Total restoration costs climbed toward £3 million. When the work was finished, the National Audit Office reassessed his rent at £90,000 a year, and he paid it every year without dispute. Compare that, if you want some context, to how differently Andrew's arrangement at Royal Lodge was documented over the same period. One brother followed the rules to the letter. The other reportedly didn't, and it was the one who did everything correctly who eventually found himself under review, because Edward didn't stop at restoration. In 2007, through his company Eclipse Nominees Limited, he paid £5 million to extend his lease to 150 years, locking in control for generations, including the right to sell the lease and keep any profit. By 2026, that property was estimated to be worth roughly £30 million. And once Charles's modernisation agenda started tightening around royal leases and finances, Bagshot Park suddenly looked to some inside the palace like unfinished business. Here's where you need to pay close attention, because this is the part almost nobody outside the family reportedly saw happening in real time. Charles came to the throne in September 2022, talking about a slimmed-down monarchy, fewer working royals, tighter finances, more central control, reasonable on paper. But by 2026, the mechanics of that vision had allegedly started looking less like reform and more like consolidation. Less is under quiet review, financial audits behind closed doors, and Bagshot Park, sitting on a £30 million freehold, effectively controlled by Edward, became a target. What the people pushing that review apparently hadn't accounted for was a man who had been building his defence since 1998. Because Elizabeth in her final years reportedly did something Philip had been urging her toward, she wrote a letter of intent, tying Bagshot Park to the Edinburgh title for the length of Edward's life, a document said to have been witnessed by Philip himself in his last weeks. A man watching everything he'd spent 70 years building start to shift, decided to spend some of his remaining time protecting his youngest son from an institution he understood better than almost anyone alive. Edward kept that letter. He kept every lease document, every repair invoice, every audit result, nearly 3 decades of paperwork. Nobody inside the palace apparently realized still existed in full. Then Anne walked in. Up to that point, this had all been lawyers against lawyers, paper against paper. Anne and Sophie were not historically close. As recently as 2021, the distance between them was visible. And Anne has never been someone who performs warmth she doesn't feel. So when Anne reportedly stepped into a private room at Buckingham Palace and put her support publicly and personally behind Edward and Sophie, it read as something different from family loyalty. It read like a verdict. According to those tracking the family's internal dynamics, that same quiet alignment extended further than Anne alone, with Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, said to be watching and privately sympathetic to the position Edward had built. By the afternoon of March 25th, the formal note went out from the office of the Master of the Jewel House to Sophie. The Anthem Tiara would remain under her exclusive private control. No explanation, no acknowledgement of what had led there. At the same time, the Bagshot Park review was quietly closed. framed publicly, if it was framed at all, as recognition of the Edinburgh household's stewardship of the estate. Careful language, designed so nobody inside the palace had to say the word defeat, but nobody inside missed what it actually meant. The title Elizabeth promised, the house Edward rebuilt with his own money, the tiara that carried his mother-in-law's private affection inside it, all of it confirmed, on the record, exactly where Elizabeth and Philip had placed it, and beyond the reach of the son who currently wears the crown. What it costs going forward is harder to put in writing than the note itself. The relationship between Charles and Edward is described by those close to the family as permanently altered, not visibly, not in a way the public will ever see at a state event, but understood by everyone inside those walls. They will know one brother had to hire lawyers to hold what was his against the other. They will know the institution that raised them both nearly became a weapon between them. Two centers of gravity now sit inside a smaller Windsor structure. At the center, Charles and Camilla still pushing toward a leaner, more centralized monarchy. Away from that center, a quieter formation, Anne, Edward, Sophie, and reportedly a sympathetic William and Catherine holding a line, not loudly, not publicly, just refusing to let what was built before them be rewritten. For James, Earl of Wessex, and Lady Louise Windsor, watching their father hold this ground without ever raising his voice publicly, the lesson is apparently already learned. He built his case over decades. He kept every document. He trusted paperwork over sentiment. When the moment came, he was ready before anyone else knew there was a fight. One day, the Duke of Edinburgh title passes to James. He'll carry it, knowing something previous holders never had to reckon with, that the institution capable of giving a title is also capable of trying to take it back, and that preparation, not affection, is what actually protects a family's inheritance. Charles still has the crown, he still has the structure, the ceremony, the authority that comes with the position. What he apparently no longer has is the assumption that everything inside that structure answers to him without question. Elizabeth is gone, but on March 25, 2026, her decisions reportedly held. Philip is gone, but the letter he witnessed while dying held too, against lawyers, against palace pressure, against the very institution he spent his life inside of. And in a 120-room house on 51 acres in Surrey, a man the press rarely took seriously, and the institution apparently never feared enough, went to sleep that night with his home, his title, and his wife's tiara exactly where his mother left them. If you followed this family long enough, you already know the quiet moments inside those walls matter more than anything announced on the palace steps. This story isn't finished. Subscribe, turn on notifications, because what comes next in this family is going to be even harder to look away from,